everybody. This is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon, whatever day you're watching the show. Wanted to come on and give you my breakdown of how I see the 49ers offense when it comes to the initial 53-man roster when training camp breaks at the end of the training camp. So we'll get into that. We'll go through all the positions on offense: quarterback, running back, receiver, offensive line, tight end. Just want to jump in real quick, and we have Raphael 5629ers is here on the tuned in. He says, "What's up, Jack and everyone? What's up, Raphael? Good to have you on board. Hope you're having a good Friday today, and it's going to be a fun show. We'll get through this, and if there's any questions, go ahead and hit them up in the comments, and I'll make sure to get to them. So let's jump right into the quarterback, because I think the quarterback room is going to be all these positions have some interesting battles on, and that's one of the things as we go into this season. This training camp, there's really nowhere along the 49ers roster where you can't find a good battle at some point in the breakdown, whether it's for the starting position or just to make the roster. So let's start off with quarterback, though. There's 4 quarterbacks on the roster as they go into training camp right now. We'll find out how this plays out, but you have Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, of course, the ones that everybody's talking about. And they also have Nate Sudfeld, who the 49ers gave a $2 million guaranteed contract this offseason to bring him back. And you have Brock Purdy, who the 49ers drafted with the final pick in the draft this offseason. The way that I see this position unfolding, first off, let's get to the Jimmy Garoppolo scenario. I think that Garoppolo is going to be gone prior to the start of training camp. I don't see the 49ers letting him show up to camp and participate. If he's healthy, they can't not let him practice. And that's unless he chooses not to show up. That's the only other piece, right? But if he does show up to Santa Clara, and he's healthy, the 49ers they can't hold him out without an injury. That's part of the collective bargaining agreement. So I just don't see that happening. I don't see Jimmy Garoppolo showing up in Santa Clara. And when you look at it, the way that I see this, like I said, the way I see this playing out, Garoppolo is going to be gone. I think there's going to be a trade partner that he's going to end up with at some point before training camp starts. We got about 2 weeks left before that happens, about a week and a half now. They start practice on Wednesday, the 27th of July, so about a week and a half from now. Beyond that, I think, obviously Trey Lance is going to be the starting quarterback for the 49ers this year. That's my projection. I think that's the consensus among everybody who follows the team closely, that he will be the starting quarterback. And then it gets interesting behind him because you have Nate Sudfeld and Brock Purdy. Nate Sudfeld's never really gotten much of a shot to play during the regular season. And when he hasn't done very well. The $2 million fully guaranteed, that's kind of an interesting piece there, because that $2 million a fully guaranteed contract could be in part allow them to not necessarily have to keep him on the 53-man roster. Part of that reason they gave him so much money to come back could be because they want to be able to pull him back and forth between the practice squad and the regular squad in order to kind of protect Brock Purdy from landing somewhere else, so that he could be their long-term backup solution at quarterback. So that's going to be where, really, with this one, we're going to really be paying close attention to Trey Lance throughout training camp and see how he's doing and his performance. But we also need to keep a close eye on what Sudfeld and Purdy are doing as well, because I think there is going to be a battle there for the backup spot. We know Sudfeld's going to be around the 49ers one way or another, whether it's on the 53 or on the practice squad. It's just which one of those two makes the squad, because I do believe that it's only going to be 2 that the 49ers carry on their 53-man roster when they break training camp, just because of some of the wanting to carry extra people at other positions. So we know it's going to be Trey Lance. I think the second one's going to be Nate Sudfeld, and then Brock Purdy will be on the practice squad if the 49ers feel that they can get him through that way. That's the way they'll do it. If they don't feel like they can get Purdy from the roster through waivers and back onto the practice squad, they might go ahead and keep him on the roster and do that with Sudfeld and bring him and re-sign him to the practice squad. He already has the guaranteed money. So that's how I see the quarterback situation playing out. You're going to have Trey Lance, Nate Sudfeld, Brock Purdy to the practice squad. That's my initial feeling on how it's actually going to play out. Let's jump over to the running backs. The running back position is a really fun one to look at, because there's a lot of different scenarios and ways that the 49ers could go here. They have Elijah Mitchell, who was the leading rusher for the team last season. They have Trey Sermon, who they took in the third round last year that didn't really produce much of anything. They drafted Tyrion Davis-Price in the third round this offseason. They have Jeff Wilson Jr. coming back, who dealt with a lot of injuries in the first half of last year, was never fully healthy during the regular season, but he brings a lot of versatility. He's back, as well as JaMycal Hasty, who filled the third down back role last season when he was healthy. And they also have Jordan Mason, who was an undrafted free agent that they picked up after the draft out of Georgia Tech, who has looked really good throughout OTAs and minicamp. It's going to be exciting to see what he can do during training camp with the pads on when they actually start to hit, and then into those preseason games when he has to run through defenders. Finally gets a chance to do that. And then at fullback, they have Kyle Juszczyk and Josh Okett. So, you look at the 49ers running game from last year, was a bit up and down. Elijah Mitchell, he was, like I said earlier, he was the leading guy with 963 yards, 5 touchdowns. He had 207 carries. Those are pretty good. The problem with Mitchell, the only issue there was that he had a hard time staying healthy, especially when he'd have a bigger workload, and that caused him to miss 6 games, including 4 of the last 8 in the regular season. The 49ers were able to overcome that a little bit, and I think that led to some of the decision to go out and draft running back Tyrion Davis-Price out of LSU when they did, as early as they did. They were in round 3. Trey Sermon, like I said earlier, he never really materialized. With Sermon, the 49ers feel like he's improved, like the work that he put in last year is going to make them better, or make him better. And really with Sermon, his biggest issue is staying tight to the blocks, and he kind of has a tendency to not make the cut and get right off of the block. He kind of tends to wander a little bit too far sideways one way or the other, which you can't really do at the NFL level. You got to hit see the hole and hit it quick, and try to get as tight as you can to the blocks. And then you have Price when Tyrion Davis-Price, who's a big back, he's going to be a bruiser. All 3 of those guys fit kind of a similar mold. Big, physical guys who can really pound it in between the tackles. I know that we saw Mitchell quite a bit last year, getting to the outside. The way the 49ers had to run the ball was on the toss, and it was really, they used what looked like a toss to get into their outside zone. I think some of that was because they were able to kind of wind that back and get overflow, and then take advantage of that and cut it back up inside. I think that's why they were doing with that last season. The big question with this group is, can they stay healthy? Like I said, they had the issues with Mitchell. Trey Sermon, I think it was the second carry of his career out there in Philadelphia, got dinged up. So this was an area that was a tough one for him. But I see this group coming down to the battle here. Elijah Mitchell is going to make the roster. Tyrion Davis-Price, we know he's going to be on the roster, and Kyle Juszczyk. So that's 3 of the 5 running backs that they're going to keep. So that leaves you with deciding between Trey Sermon, Jeff Wilson Jr., JaMycal Hasty, and the undrafted free agent rookie Jordan Mason. And Jordan Mason, he has the size to be an every down back, and you look at his size and it matches up with Mitchell, Sermon, and Davis-Price. He's a bigger back, but he has speed. He's explosive. He has good hands. It's going to be really interesting to see how that last running back position, works out. It's going to be between him, Jeff Wilson Jr., and JaMycal Hasty. I think that in the end, Jeff Wilson Jr. makes the roster. I also think that Trey Sermon makes the roster. I think you have Mitchell, Sermon, Davis-Price, Jeff Wilson Jr., and Kyle Juszczyk as your running backs that make the 53-man roster. And then San Francisco is going to try to get Hasty and Mason back on the practice squad. That's going to be a tough, though, because I think if Mason shows what I think he's going to be capable of, I think there will be teams that are going to try to take a flyer on him and bring him in after training camp, or at that point, if he gets released, they're going to try to sign him to their 53-man roster. So that's going to be an issue, an interesting choice to make. With Jeff Wilson Jr., it's that ability to play fullback and tailback, halfback, that versatility that the 49ers look for, that makes him a key. Plus, he has the special teams capacity, ability. I'm not sure if Mason has that. We haven't seen that from him yet. That's something that I'm sure they'll be taking a look at during the training camp and preseason. But right now, for me, like I said, at quarterback, it's going to be Trey Lance and Nate Sudfeld, and then a running back, Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, Tyrion Davis-Price, Jeff Wilson Jr., and then Kyle Juszczyk will be the fullback. So that gives you the first 7. Let's go through really quick. There was a question over here from Raphael 562 Niners. He's a member of the Tool Shed and is a member of the toolbox. The toolbox there. You ask questions, they get answered. Although this is an offensive show, he wants to know about Dee Ford, and is Dee Ford going to be in training camp? I highly doubt that he will be. I think right now the 49ers are just trying to get him to be able to pass a physical, and then once that happens, they'll make a decision on how they're going to move on from him, whether it's going to be Dee Ford retiring or if they're just going to end up having to release him outright. But Dee Ford will not be back, I don't believe, with the team when they go into training camp on the 27th. They report on the 26th. The first day of training camp is on the 27th. I don't think that we'll see Dee Ford there. I think there'll be a decision one way or another prior to that. And even so, he won't be there even if he hasn't officially been taken off the roster at that point. All right, so let's go ahead. But thank you, Raphael. That's a good quote. Everybody has one of the positions and one of the players that a lot of people are wondering what the situation is going to be with Dee Ford, especially with what the 49ers gave up to get him. So let's jump over. We've done the quarterbacks, we've done the running backs, and now let's jump into the wide receivers. This is another good group. You have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Jauan Jennings. I think those are the top 3, pretty much locked in. Those are the 3 guys that are your top 3. I think Ray McCloud and Danny Gray gives you number 4 and 5. Ray McCloud's a guy that they picked up from Pittsburgh that has special teams ability. During OTAs and minicamp, he was extremely active as far as a receiver goes. He was able to show the ability to make plays at all levels of the field, which is really important with the 49ers offense. And that's what you want to see. Although, his usage last year in Pittsburgh was more around the line of scrimmage. I think it was good to see him be able to make plays all over the place. And you have Danny Gray, who they drafted in the 3rd round, who gives them that speed element, going to try to take the top off the defense. So I think you got 5 guys there. They're going to carry 6, and that 6th player is going to come down between veteran Marcus Johnson and Malik Turner. Those are 2 veterans. You also have Keyshawn Johnson, Taysir Mack, Austin Mack, and Tay Martin. Taysir Mack and Tay Martin are the 2 undrafted free agent rookies that the 49ers brought in this year. And the way that I see this group playing out, it's going to come down to Johnson and Turner, I believe, and it's probably going to go to Malik Turner. The 49ers, when you look at the way rosters are constructed in the NFL, generally that last roster spot comes down to a guy who can last roster spot in a position group outside of quarterback. That usually comes down to a guy who has the ability to play special teams and contribute in that way. And so that's where I think Malik Turner has the upper hand. Turner played under 49ers special teams coordinator Brian Schneider when the 2 were up in Seattle. So there's familiarity there. Plus, when you look at Turner's career, he's been one of the most productive. He's been more productive than Marcus Johnson overall. And I really think that familiarity and what he's been able to show in the past gets him onto the 49ers final roster. Although Tay Martin has also shown very well, and Johnson has the ability to be a good receiver. I just feel like it's going to come down to Turner there. And you have a good group. If you have with any of these guys, really your top 5 are your top 3. When you go to Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and Jauan Jennings, that's a really strong group across. Even when you compare that to the rest of the NFL, it's really good. And then to have a guy like Malik Turner rounding out that group, what he can do on special teams is big. McCloud, like I mentioned, he joined the 49ers. He was with Pittsburgh last year. He had 39 grabs, but he only had 277 yards. So that's why I say what we saw out of him during OTAs in minicamp and that ability to make plays all over the place was good to see during that period. He's very similar to last offseason and during training camp. Trent Sherfield was the new addition that was making all those plays and stepped up. And so we'll see if Gray can continue, or if McCloud, can continue to show out once they get into the training camp period. And if he does, with the contract they gave him, the 49ers gave him, he's going to be back. And I think that he'll be able to help them out on the offensive side with a few receptions here and there, and definitely give them some boost in the return game that they were missing a season ago. They've really struggled with the kickoff and punt returns over the last couple of years. So getting McLeod in for that role in itself is really good. And the Friars went out and got a lot of guys to try to help with that special teams group. But they're also going to be able to help out on the offensive and defensive side. That was important for him. So, and then as far as Danny Gray, really quick before I move on off of the wide receivers, Gray, he had an excellent first practice in front of us during rookie minicamp. However, we never saw him again. He missed the rest of the workouts that were held in front of the media due to a strained hamstring. So not really sure what he's going to look like against the veterans, but we haven't seen them in that role. The Friars have possibly, I'm not sure at what point he had that hamstring strain, but he might have practiced the first day there of OTAs and maybe some of those others when we weren't there. But as I said, the little bit that we did see was pretty good, and we'll see how that all plays out. So as far as the wide receiver room, we have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, Ray McLeod, and Danny Gray and Malik Turner. That's how I see the wide receiver group rounding out. So that gets us to 13 so far. The two quarterbacks, Nate Sudfeld and Trey Lance. The running backs, which were with the running backs we had obviously Kyle Juszczyk as the fullback. You had Elijah Mitchell at running back, Trey Sermon, Tyrion Davis-Price, and Jeff Wilson Jr. running, filling out that room. So let's move off of wide receivers to tight end. George Kittle is obviously going to make the roster. Not a whole lot of reason to talk much about George Kittle. He's still among the best tight ends in the game, really. He's missed at least he missed 3 games in 2021. He hasn't played more than 14 games since the 2018 season. He's dealt with injuries. In 19, he missed 2 games. He missed a bunch of games in 2020, and then he missed 3 last season. But he's still one of the best in the game. You look at his numbers. He had 71 receptions for 910 yards, a career-high 6 touchdowns last season. With him, those numbers are strong. You go back and you look through George Kittle's career, his best season there in 2018, he had 130-plus targets that year, almost 80. He had 79 in the final 8 games when he was playing with Nick Mullins. And this, Kittle is a guy who does a lot of things for the 49ers offense in terms of his run blocking and even sometimes pass blocking. But they need to be able to get him more involved in the passing game. And if they do, his numbers are going to go up because he's that kind of a player. He's dynamite after the catch. Can get open, and with Trey Lance, Trey Lance likes to throw to tight ends. He targeted him quite a bit when he was at North Dakota State. The tight ends and the fullbacks both he off of play action because that's one of the things that he did very well during his time up at North Dakota State. And I think something that drew the 49ers to him was his ability to turn his back to the defense and make plays with his arm. And I think that's going to help George Kittle to make some big plays. Beyond that, it's a little bit of a question mark throughout throughout the tight end room. The 49ers have been looking to upgrade at tight end 2 really since the 2019 season. They brought in a veteran for 2020. They tried to do it again last year, but Ross Dwelley just keeps beating everybody out and sticking around. And so, this offseason, the 49ers brought in veterans Tyler Croft and Troy Fumagalli to compete with Ross Dwelley, and then also Charlie Warner for roster spots. And they also had they brought in Tanner Hudson. They signed him off of Tampa Bay's practice squad and put him on their practice squad. And then they've been carrying Jordan Matthews on their practice squad as well. So they have some really good depth behind George Kittle, and it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. I do think that there's a possibility that there's a change within that group. I think George Kittle, I said he's going to be there. I do think that Ross Dwelley still makes it. Ross Dwelley is somebody who every time they try to move off of him, he just doesn't allow it to happen because he keeps making plays. Dwelley has great hands. There's no question about that. When you watch him, he catches everything that they throw to him. That's part of why he sticks around. I really think that what's going to happen here is the battle is going to be for the third tight end spot. And I think you're gonna see Charlie Warner really have to fight for his position with the 49ers. And I have a feeling that Tyler Croft, the veteran that they signed this offseason, during right around the time that minicamp or OTAs had started, I really think he's going to be able to push Warner for that third and final spot. I believe the 49ers carry 3 tight ends this season on their initial roster. George Kittle, Ross Dwelley, and Tyler Croft will be the third. Tyler Hudson and Jordan Matthews, one of those two is going to make the practice squad, and maybe even Charlie Warner ends up there if he's not signed off of another team once he hits waivers. Because remember, they've got to be waived, they've got to clear waivers, and then you can sign them to your practice squad. I just look at this and I think that the 49ers need to upgrade a little bit there, because last year this is one of the things is, like I said earlier, 71 receptions for 910 yards for George Kittle. Dwelley and Warner combined had only 11 targets last season, so they weren't even really a part of the 49ers passing offense. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how this goes. And one other thing to think about when you look at the tight ends, and one reason why I think that they can carry just 3, with Trey Lance taking over, the way that Juwan Jennings has stepped up, and then also some of the ways that we saw the 49ers use Kyle Juszczyk last season. They don't necessarily need to have a fourth wide tight end. They don't need to have extra guys there, because Jennings has the size to run all of those routes from inside that you would ask your move tight end to run. And he can block down in there as well. He's a strong guy. Same thing with Kyle Juszczyk. He can be lined up all over the field. There's times when the 49ers have 2 running backs on the field, but he's really more of a wing tight end, move tight end, like an H-back type of a player than anything else. So he's really like your quasi number 2 tight end in a lot of ways. So that's why I think at this spot, the 49ers can afford to only keep 3, stash 1 or 2 on the practice squad, and so that you can bring them up later on if there's any issues with Kittle, Dwelley, or Croft. So that's the way that I see the tight end room shaking out. Real quick before we get on to the offensive line, which will be our next group, let me do the super chat we have here. Debadal, thank you very much for the super chat. He says, odds of Mr. Irrelevant beating out Dudfeld. I think the odds of that is probably a little less than 50-50. The only reason that I think there's a possibility there is just because I think part of the reason they gave Nate Sudfeld so much money is because that's kind of like their insurance to where if they can put him on the practice squad. They don't have to keep him on the 53-man. I think that's partly why he had that $2 million signing bonus. So if they're concerned that they would not be able to keep Purdy if they tried to put him through waivers, that's why you would do that with Sudfeld. Otherwise, you have Sudfeld there. And as far as the odds of him beating out Sudfeld, even if Sudfeld isn't on the initial 53-man roster, I think he is still their backup quarterback. And I think, like I said, it's a matter of just trying to keep thinking, because they can bring him back, they can move him back and forth between the two, I believe, like they did last year. Sudfeld completed a little over 74% of his passes during training camp. It was 74.5, I believe it was, percent of his passes, if my memory serves me correct in it. And Trey Lance was at 74.6. So he was right there. I know there's some reports of things of maybe Purdy being better than Sudfeld during training camp. I disagree, or at least during OTAs and minicamp. I disagree. I mean, he wasn't as bad as some people might have thought he was going to be. His lack of arm strength isn't much of a hindrance. To me, he looks a lot like Nick Mullins, which we know Kyle Shanahan really likes, a smart, feisty quarterback like that. So I think that's partly why they drafted him. And then when you watch his college film, he really reminds you at times of what Nick Mullins did during his time with the 49ers, where he makes lots of really good plays. And then he does a few other times where it's just like, what was that? Just some bad plays as well. So if you're asking me for odds, I think it's pretty unlikely that of him beating out Sudfeld and actually having to be and being the guy that if Trey Lance were to go down, I believe it would be Nate Sudfeld that would come into the game first. So we'll see how that plays out during the season. But I appreciate the super chat. Thank you very much for the donation. Really appreciate that. Now let's jump over to let's go through this really quick. We just did tight ends at tight end. George Kittle, Ross Dwelley, and Tyler Kroft. At wide receiver, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, Ray McLeod, Danny Gray, and Malik Turner. At running back, it's going to be Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, Tyrion Davis-Price, Jeff Wilson Jr., and Kyle Juszczyk at fullback. Quarterback, obviously Trey Lance to start, and then you have Nate Sudfeld is my choice as the guy that's going to be coming off of the bench. Now, let's move on to the offensive line, like I said. So with that group, this is one that, this is a tough group just because they have so many different possible combinations of players. So at the end of the day, when I looked at this group, I had to try to be really smart about the way that I looked at this. Not smart, but just trying to really be strategic in how this could work out. Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Daniel Brunskill, Mike McGlinchey. Based off of what we saw during OTAs and what we've heard people talking about around the 49ers, meaning Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, I believe that is your starting offensive line. Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Daniel Brunskill, and McGlinchey. It gets tricky, though, because we haven't seen Brunskill on the field yet. I think some of that during OTAs, he had some injuries, and I think he had surgery in the offseason as well. So they were just taking their time rehabbing him back. And we haven't seen McGlinchey as well. The only guys that we saw play throughout OTAs and minicamp and stay at the same spot the whole time were Jake Brendel at center and Aaron Banks at left guard. I think you can pretty much write down Trent Williams and Eke, obviously, at left tackle. I think you can put left guard at Aaron Banks being your starter there as well in Eke. The rest of them are a little bit of question marks because I do think there's going to be some competition there at center. I think it would behoove the 49ers to have Daniel Brunskill and Jake Brendel compete for the center position. I think Brunskill gives him more competition than the other centers that are in camp. Those other centers being Keaton Sutherland and Donovan West. I just believe that really getting Brunskill in there to compete with him a little bit would be the best way to go. But at the end of the day, I think Brendel beats him out. Jalen Moore, Justin School, Spencer Burford, and Nick Zakel, are the other four. I think the 49ers are going to go with 9 offensive linemen this year. That's partly when you look at the other positions, only having 2 quarterbacks, having only 3 tight ends allows you to carry an extra offensive lineman. I think the 49ers are going to go to 9 so that they can carry, Moore, who was their draft pick from last season, Spencer Burford and Nick Zakel, who are their 2 picks this year. And then Justin School would be their swing tackle playing on the right side and the left side. Jalen Moore will compete for that swing tackle role. But really watching him, what we saw of him last year, he wasn't bad when he was playing, but he wasn't good either. He was okay. I think Justin School, fully healthy Justin School, gives you a better tackle prospect than Moore right now. Spencer Burford looked really good during OTAs and minicamp. The speed and the hand strength, that striking ability, the things that we heard and read about in his scouting report shows up on the field when you watch him in person. And Nick Zakel just has that ability. He's a bulldog, and he's going to be really good over there as a kind of like your swing. I think he's going to be your swing guard type of a prospect. He also played some tackle in college, but I think he's going to be more of an interior player. So this group's going to, like I said, it'll be It'll be a lot of competition there. Colton McKivitz is another name to watch. Obviously, it was McKivitz who got thrown in Week 18 against the Rams, started the game, and the 49ers won. Were able to go to the playoffs in part because of that performance. And that's one of the things, when you look at this group, when you look at the offensive line room, they've been pretty maligned throughout this offseason in terms of their ability. And I think some of that has been a little overly harsh. The 49ers, if you go back through 2019, they played, I think it was 8, maybe 9 games without Joe Staley at left tackle. And between Justin Skule and Daniel Brunskill, with those two starting at left tackle, the 49ers were 8-1. So, and I believe the lone loss was the game out in Baltimore when they lost 20-17 in the rain. So, and then you go into last season and the 49ers were able to get on their run and be highly successful in the second half of their season with Tom Compton out at right tackle. They were able to beat the Rams with Tom Compton at right tackle and Colton McKivitz at left tackle. And as you noticed, I didn't even have Colton McKivitz on making the final 53-man roster. So I don't think the 49ers have big name guys along that offensive line, but I think they have guys who are capable. And Kyle Shanahan has shown the ability to work around that, along with the quarterbacks as well. The running game helps those guys. And I also think, the running ability, the movement, athleticism of Trey Lance will help that group out as well. So I just don't feel like the offensive line is going to be quite as bad as some other folks seem to be. And I shouldn't even say that. Just the general consensus from what you see around the comments with the 49ers is that offensive line is going to be really bad. And I don't think it's going to be necessary. It might not be great, but it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be as bad as some people suspect. Really quick, we have CG Ruthless. He says, "Hey Jack, good to have you on, CG." He asked, "What do you think of Spencer Burford?" I think Spencer Burford's going to be. I really like him. When you watch him, he has really strong hands. Like I said, he's a really good striker. He moves really well for a guy his size. He looks. I think he's going to be the guy who replaces Mike McGlinchey out at right tackle, but I haven't really seen enough of him to say for sure that I think that I would plant my flag there. But I really feel strongly that that's the direction that they're headed, with Jalen Moore becoming the future at right guard, and with Spencer Burford becoming the future over at the right tackle spot. We'll see how this plays out throughout the season, but I really like him. Like I said, strong hands, good feet, moves really well, really does a good job of getting up to the second level during his run blocking, which is something that Mike McGlinchey makes him so good in the run game for the 49ers. So I'm a believer in Spencer Burford and what he brings to the table. That's a really good question. Thanks for asking that one. So just to wrap it up, we're about 34 minutes in. I think we've gone through all the position groups. Let me just rattle them off for you one more time. Let's start with the offensive line because we're there right now. Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Daniel Brunskill, and Mike McGlinchey. That's going to be your starting offensive line. The question around that with McGlinchey is the health. Is he healthy? That's going to be the biggest. I think the biggest question along that line is going to be McGlinchey's health. I think Banks is going to be fine. I think Brunskill is going to be fine. That gives you 3 of the 5 guys returning for the 49ers, which is actually the same number of offensive linemen returning for the Los Angeles Rams. They've actually lost their left tackle this offseason. So Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Daniel Brunskill, Mike McGlinchey, your starters. Jalen Moore, Justin Skule, Spencer Burford, and Nick Zakelj make up your 9-man offensive line group that makes it through training camp onto the initial 53-man roster. Good to have you on board, Bryant. Bryant is a member of the Toolbox. He says, "What's up, Jack?" What's up, Bryant? Good to have you on here. We will be doing the special teams portion next week, just to hit you up because I know you like the special teams, Bryant. Melvin asks, Jack, is it your opinion that West just isn't big enough and strong enough yet to compete at the pro level? I think it's going to take him a little bit of time. I think that there's some things, some traits to really like there. I just don't see him being a guy that's going to be able to leapfrog Sutherland, who has NFL experience, Jake Brendel, who has NFL experience, and Daniel Brunskill to fill that to get onto the roster. And I think Nick Zakel and Donovan West are more along the guys that are going to be competing down the road to be that center for the 49ers as we get into 23 and 24. That's a good question, though. So just wrapping up really quick, like I said, 53-man roster, offensive line, once again, 9 of them: Williams, Banks, Brendel, Brunskill, McGlinchey, Moore, School, Burford, and Zakel. Then we get into the tight ends. At tight end, we have 3, and we're going to have a tight end. It's going to be George Kittle, Ross Dwelley, and Tyler Kroft. Wide receiver, there'll be 6. Those are going to be Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, Ray McLeod, rookie Danny Gray, and then veteran Malik Turner, who makes the roster. At running back, we're going to have 4 halfbacks, 1 fullback, and one of those running backs is going to be a guy who can play both halfback and fullback. It's going to be Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, Tyrion Davis-Price, and Jeff Wilson Jr. at the halfback position. Remember, Wilson's the guy who can play a little bit of fullback as well. And then you have Kyle Juszczyk. And so really quick on that, if you have Jeff Wilson Jr. in there at halfback along with Kyle Juszczyk, you can move that around in a lot of different ways. And that 22 or 21 personnel becomes 11 really quick with your ability to move Juszczyk down into a tight end role or something like that. Or if there's times even you might be able to put going like into 21 personnel, and it really becomes 11 because you have Juszczyk up at that tight end, like on a wing position, you motion him out or whatever, and now you have Wilson Jr. as your lead back. We saw the Flyers do that a lot last year with when they were running Deebo Samuel so much. But that running back room: Mitchell, Sermon, Price, Wilson Jr., and Kyle Juszczyk, and then at quarterback, Trey Lance and Nate Sudfeld. So that's your breakdown for the offense. The way that I see that projecting out once they get through training camp. We won't know this for a while, but that's the way that I see it working out. So that's that. We got a good question here. I like this one from Corey. He asked, Jack, if you were the GM of the 49ers and Jimmy G came to you and said he will take a pay cut to be Trey Lance's backup, would you keep him? And this is a good one because the thing when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo, from a football perspective, just football, we're not talking about the issues that you might have in the locker room and everywhere else, but from just a football perspective, you have Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo as your quarterbacks, and you have a much stronger quarterback room than you do if you don't have Jimmy Garoppolo there. There shouldn't be any debate of that. Where you have the issue, and I think where the debate comes about, is having Garoppolo there kind of just creates a distraction for the 49ers at this point. There are players in that locker room that are loyal to Jimmy Garoppolo still. I think they would obviously they're going to play as hard as they can for Trey Lance because that's what you have to do at the NFL level. But I do think it could be a little bit of a distraction. I don't think it's a distraction because Jimmy Garoppolo is looking to be a distraction. Jimmy Garoppolo just kind of blends into the group. We saw that last year. But at the same time, it's just a really tough one. Right now, the 49ers can re-sign Deebo Samuel today. So, and I don't believe they were going to do anything with Nick Bosa this offseason anyway. I think that their whole plan, it was to get Deebo Samuel done this year. I think Nick Bosa, the target is either next year or Nick might even, and his group might even push that off to another season after that. The 49ers can go out right now. They've already built their roster. They can sign Deebo Samuel to the extension that is on par with every other receiver that has received a new contract this year in terms of the signing bonus and the money that he's going to get in year one. They can do all those things, and they can keep Jimmy Garoppolo around, without even having him take a pay cut. So, the only way that you can get Jimmy Garoppolo to take a pay cut and come back is he has to agree to it. And you would essentially have to basically like cut him and bring him back, right? Because they've got to be able to get out from underneath the number. They don't want to extend him. They don't want to lower his contract by extending him. And I'm not sure if they can just say, void out the rest of his contract and say it's going to be $12 million. I don't know how that works with the salary cap. I don't know the viability of that. But just from a pure football standpoint, Trey Lance as your starter, Jimmy Garoppolo as your backup. I mean, that sets up the 49ers really well for the season, because if Lance goes down, that you have somebody that's capable of winning games. I don't think you have somebody that you feel comfortable winning games with when it comes to Sudfeld or Brock Purdy at this point. So that's a really good question. As Bryant mentioned, he said, Corey, that's a great question, and I agree. That was a really good one, because it's true. That's the way that I feel about it. I know some people just want to see Jimmy Garoppolo gone. I get it. This needs to be Trey Lance's team. But from a pure football standpoint, having Garoppolo on your roster is better than having him somewhere else, and if he can be your backup. And I really appreciate the super sticker there, Corey. I really appreciate the donation there and the question. It was a really good one. Let's see what else. If there's any other comments or questions over there I thought I might have seen one, but doesn't look like it. So I think this is going to be, an interesting group. Harold mentions here that the NFL Network is reporting that the New York Giants may have interest in Garoppolo. They may. That's a position. That's a spot that may have some interest. They did bring in a quarterback this offseason, kind of as a backup role. I don't think they're sold on Daniel Jones out there. I think with Garoppolo, they'd be, again, that's a position where Jimmy Garoppolo is an upgrade over their starter. He's an upgrade over their backup. So that's another potential landing spot if the Giants want to bring a quarterback in. I don't think they have the salary cap money to just trade outright for Jimmy Garoppolo right now and keep that contract the way that it is. But reports have stated that the 49ers are allowing Garoppolo and his team to work with other teams on contract, changes, which would benefit everybody. So they're going to move him, is my belief. It's just a matter of him being healthy, passing that physical, and Sun team willing to give him enough to pull the trigger on it. So the Giants could be one. I think we're going to have to wait until on the Browns until right before training camp. I think that Friday before training camp is how long it's going to take before any news breaks on that. They're obviously a contender, or would be somebody that would be interested in Garoppolo. I do think Seattle is interested in him. I just don't know if there's a way that the 49ers would trade with him. But I think he would make Seattle a better team than what they have on their roster right now. So there's a lot of there's a few places out there. He could go to Houston. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a better quarterback than Davis Mills. I think they're a better team with Jimmy Garoppolo there. So their spots, I think there is interest from a number of teams. It's just everybody's kind of holding out a little bit here. And we'll see what happens with Garoppolo. But that's the show. Wanted to come on, like I said, give you guys my breakdown of how I think this offense is going to work out in 2022. We'll see. I'm going to be coming back and doing this in about a week on the defensive side. If you follow me, if you, as it says on my screen there, like and subscribe. If you like what you saw today, please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. If you're watching it and you could hit that like button for me, it'd be fantastic. And one last thing is get yourself over to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. And, the information that we talked about today has all been laid out over there over the last week and a half, going through position by position. Today, I dropped the defensive line predictions for that side of the ball. started on that. We'll wrap up the defense next Friday as well. So right before training camp comes out, the full roster will have been predicted for myself over there. And then once training camp hits, you can see the full training camp reports as well. So make 49ers.pressdemocrat.com a favorite on your web browser. Hit it up on a daily basis. I think you'll enjoy what you see. They have a pretty good comment section over there as well, especially during the games when I do the live blog. There's a lot of folks that get involved, and it can get kind of lively. That's partly how I got into doing this. I was a fan of the 49ers. I would go to the Press Democrat on a regular basis starting around 2011, 2012. Commented like crazy. One thing led to another. The group over there told me to start writing, or that I should. I did that a little bit on my own website, a Blogspot deal. Did a little bit of writing for 49ers Web Zone, and started working with the 49ers SI group in 2020. And then that, I decided that I wanted to pursue doing the 49ers Press Democrat blog over there. Asked for it, and I was lucky enough to get it. And so if you guys can give them some love and support them, that's great, because that's supporting me as well. And just want to say thanks to everybody that joins, follows the channel. Raphael 5629ers jumps in. He always reminds me to say this to you guys: like and subscribe if you can. And I appreciate the kind words from you guys, from David saying great show. Same thing with what Raphael 5629ers says there. So I really appreciate all the support. It's going to be fun. We got about a week and a half, and then we actually get to have reports of guys running around the field instead of us coming up with all kinds of different scenarios. So enjoy it. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Friday. Whatever day you're watching it, have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Take care. I will be back on Monday with my normal programming with Rob Shue and the Hammerhead Show. So take care. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.